Let's go live with Jack Kelly. Welcome to the one-of-a-kind LinkedIn live show that will help you with your job search and advancing your career. We will bring in educated career experts who will share their insights and give you inside tips on how to be successful in your job search. Now let's get into today's show with your host, Jack Kelly.
Welcome to Jack Kelly. Let's go live with Jack Kelly. I messed up the name of our show. And today I want to introduce you to one of the best HR people in the world, the Chief People Officer at Human Rights Watch, Colin Mincy. Welcome, Colin.
Jack, good to see you.
My pleasure. So, I'm so glad that you're going to be on today because during this time of year, I think not only are we busy buying gifts for ourselves and our family and friends, we look to, how we can contribute, how we can do good, how we can express gratitude. And I thought that'd be a good time to introduce someone like yourself who works with Human Rights Watch, which is a great cause. And maybe you could share a little bit about what you're about, what you do, how you help people.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And thanks for the invitation.
My pleasure.
It's good to see you. I won't tell people how long we've known each other, out of respect for both of us.
We started when we were very young.
We've been a very long time, but it's good to see you. It's good to be here. And of course, I'm always grateful to have an opportunity to talk about, our work at Human Rights Watch. And so, we're established in '78, and over the years have become, the world's leading independent organization, focusing on all of the mechanisms that we can defend and protect human rights. And we do that by honing in on violations wherever they happen to be. So bringing attention to them, through advocacy, through research, through reporting, and all of those things working together build intense pressure for action and raise the cost of human rights abuses, whether the perpetrators are governments or businesses or individuals with means. We look under every rock, and our goal is to get people's stories and people's experiences and the information around those atrocities out there so that we can encourage people to do the right thing. And, for over 40 years, we've been very intentional and tenacious about, laying that kind of groundwork for change and letting people know that we're watching. Our staff are reporting on conditions in some 90 countries. Our website's getting, about 1,000 hits per day, has more than 11 million followers. We're, frequently quoted, and our reports are featured in a lot of local and international media. And we're really proud of our work. And it's been a long year, 2020. When you look at the sort of journey of human rights, it's been a long several decades, but 2020 has been a really challenging year. But our some 500 folks who call themselves part of our organization never waned, still stayed focused on our mission and the importance of helping people around the world. And as 2020 draws to a close, I'm really heightened by all the work that took place despite all of the challenges and impediments we faced.
That's really amazing. And just to get a better idea, so you're in 90 countries, you say?
Yes.
And then when you say Human Rights Watch, so that maybe for the audience here, and for myself too, to understand it better, so that you're looking, when you say this, is this like you're watching out for sex traffickers, child soldiers? Can you give a sense of the types of things that you're looking out for?
Yeah. So that's a loaded question because I don't want to highlight certain parts of our work and not mention others, but we have a children's rights division We have a women's rights division. We have regional programs in Africa.
So you have that. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure. So let's say you have children, women's rights. Does that mean like in different countries as your organization?
Globally, yes. It's a global lens, right? And the people, the researchers and advocates who work in those spaces are experts in that particular field, and they work across the world to try to alleviate environments from those kinds of atrocities.
And then what do they do? Like, is it boots on the ground kind of thing where you try to take action in the country that bad stuff is happening, or is it more of public awareness to put pressure on the different governments to make the change?
Yeah, each issue area is different, Jack, but look at it sort of, I kind of look at Human Rights Watch sort of as a media organization. So we investigate and we go where the work and the stories are, and we use what we find in our platform to expose and tell the stories of what was discovered, sharing them through our various mechanisms of communication, and then our advocacy helps us sort of operationalize change, get the right people in the room, the governments, the UN, rebel groups, corporations, to try to enact policy and encourage and influence laws to make sure that justice is served in the cases where that's appropriate, and that change happens, so that what we investigate is an experience that doesn't live on after our influence.
That's great. I'm not sure if you're at liberty to say this, but is there kind of an example of something where you found some really egregious thing and then you kind of brought it to public attention and made a difference?
Yeah, I mean, countless examples. I think maybe the most recent news around the House of Representatives voting to end marijuana prohibition, which has a deep intersection into criminal justice reform in the United States, particularly around the disproportionate sentencing around drug offenses committed by people of color. So we were part of our U.S. program, and advocacy team were part of a coalition to help pass the MORE Act, the Marijuana Opportunity.
Well, that's that's so really interesting. I went to so you guys were instrumental in this.
We're part of that coalition. Yes.
Wow, that's so it's really, it runs the gamut with so many different issues. But I'm sorry, Jared, I just didn't realize.
Yep.
It's interesting, and this is why I thought it'd be cool to go over it, because I think a lot of people like myself aren't really sure, like, what does this all entail?
Yeah.
And it's very far-reaching. So you were part of the whole coalition.
Well, our research with the American Civil Liberties Union, which showed that in the U.S. people were being arrested for drug possession every 25 seconds, helped start some of the conversation and some of the grassroots movements in getting there. And remember that this started on state ballots as well, but our research helped helped inform the conversation, and then we were directly working with other groups to get this bill written and passed in the House.
Every 25 seconds?
Yes, sir.
That's mind-numbing to and then you say it disproportionately impacts people of color.
Yes. Yes.
And so now what happens now? Like, where do we stand with it? Like, in terms of
I mean, that's a good question. So this is a recent legislative victory, and so I think now, the composition of our sort of political landscape in the U.S. suggests, I think, that this is going to be difficult for folks to for us to get passed in the Senate. But it brings a long needed conversation um, around understanding the impact that marijuana prohibition and its criminality has had on countless families, and as I mentioned before, no more than Black and Brown communities. And so I think now it's about working with the Biden administration to try to get something passed in the Senate, and and try to make something of this moment that the war on drugs never got to.
So is the next step, would you, in addition to going to the Senate, what do you do with people who are in jail for a long time for this? Do you try to commute their sentences to get them out? Is that part of?
There's been lots of movements, and even Mayor de Blasio in New York City was part of a movement to look at lower level drug offenders who are spending considerable periods of time in jail. I'm not close enough to work to know the next steps in and what happens to those sentences and how they're commuted.
Yeah.
But I suspect that that's a much further down the line conversation as we look to pass this bill into law rightfully.
So, all right. So how does a Wall Street guy, someone who's been on Wall Street for years, all of a sudden go and now into, and what would you call it, an NGO? And we can talk about that too, to explain the differences, to kind of move into this nonprofit world?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I've ever considered myself a Wall Street guy, but it's fair. I was close enough to wear the cape, and
that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, actually that's exactly what I was going to say, is that there is in my heart, I actually feel more prepared in what I'm doing today because I started in financial services. And certainly like working in global organizations, developing influencing skills when you're a 26-year-old HR associate supporting a trading floor, knowing when to pick your battles, like all of those things prepared me. But I, always wanted to be a banker. I grew up knowing that I wanted to be a banker and I wanted to go into banking. And I was privileged enough to become an inroad scholar and get accepted into, internship and rotation programs at JP Morgan. And I kind of realized early on that I'm not sure that banking was for me. And so I liked the spirit of competition. I liked the mechanisms of banking and how it made the economy work and how it made industries thrive. Like I appreciated all of those things, but I wasn't sure that I was a banker. And so I quit, with no notice and no backup plan because,
Wow.
Sometimes these stupid things.
That's gutsy.
Dumb, right? Not,
I was being polite.
Right? And really dumb. And fortunately, I had not socialized this with my parents. I just got up one day and decided.
Oh my God, what did they say to you?
Make a really important decision. And I went to HR to quit, and they said, we can't let you do this because you're going to have a really difficult time finding another job in banking. To which I told them, well, that's fine, because I'm really not sure that this is what I want to do. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I hadn't quite gotten to that part. And they said, well, what you need to do is figure out what your next steps are and then come back and resign. And so several conversations later, they convinced me to try HR, which was an interesting conversation when I went home to tell my parents that I had transitioned from this perfectly appropriate rotation program that would guarantee me a full-time articulated position to wanting to, as my father said, hold hands and wipe tears, which of course is not what HR is, but what people some people who aren't as nuanced think of it. And that's how I started in HR, and I kept, as moving within financial services in the HR field. I was good with people. I had a good understanding of people and psychology. I thought it was interesting, and it kept me in the sector, which was good for lots of reasons. It kept my mind sharp. I met a lot of fascinating people. I did well. And then, I got to Credit Suisse, which is a place I always wanted to work. And it was a wonderful place and a wonderful experience. And there are wonderful people who work there. But it was a really difficult time. And I wound up spending most of my time cutting compensation packages and laying people off. And I woke up one day and I just said, okay, so this place of this inflection point, this place of reconciliation that you have when you realize you didn't want to be a banker anymore, this is what it feels like. And I went to a place called ExecuSearch, which you probably know. And I told them, I want to find a job in philanthropy or in the human rights sector or the social justice sector, because that's what I do when I'm not working as a philanthropist. And so I'd like what I do outside of work to be what I do inside of work. And they connected me to an opportunity at the International Rescue Committee, and I haven't looked back.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Just unpack a little bit of it. Number one, I think you're very brave, and I wouldn't say whatever you're like dopey, whatever, because I can't tell you as a recruiter how many times, Colin, you kind of get a sense from people. They're in a career, they're in a job that they really hate, and they did it because of parental pressure, societal pressure, the money, and they're living this life where they're not really happy. And as an HR person, you probably pick up on it too. When you interview people and you just feel they're like in the wrong, this is not for them, and they're not in it for the right reasons. And my heart goes out to those people because they're spending a whole lifetime, a whole career doing something they're just not happy with. And what a waste of time and energy. And you had the courage, and I do mean this sincerely, I'm not saying this to make you feel good. You had the courage to say, you know what? I wanted to be a banker. I tried it. And it's not what I thought it was. And I'm not going to just go through it because I'm going to make my parents happy and my neighbors will look up to me and so on. I'm going to do what I feel is right. That takes a lot of guts and courage to do, and it's great to do. And I got to applaud JP Morgan because you know what? They could have easily said, okay, thanks, goodbye.
Yes.
But that was a really nice move on their part to say,
yes.
Hey, you know what? Don't do it. Think about it. And then they came back with a suggestion for you. So you don't see that too, especially now. You don't see that as much anymore.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying that it's easy to make transitions when there's pressure you place on yourself or there's pressure that people place on you. What I am suggesting is that you spend more time at work than you do doing most other things. And if you get that feeling, that stomach pain every Sunday night or every night because you're thinking about having to go to work the next day and you're not feeling inspired or engaged or ready to meet the challenge, but like you're just going through the rigmarole, I think that's a really sad way to go through life, particularly for extended periods of time. And I would encourage people to remember that you can do a perfectly good job at a job you hate, but you can really soar in a space in a job that you love. And my father used to say that work is a resource, not a source. And I'm here to say it can be both. And yes, JP Morgan Chase is, it's an organization I grew up in. My first internship with them, I had just graduated high school. So it was before my freshman year. And I did that for 4 summers before entering into the program. They took great care of me. They're not only the reason I found HR, but it's the start of where I got that training. And those are things that they did for me that they did not have to do. And that's the culture of organizations who care more about the people than the position that the people are in.
It's a really good story. And I think so many people can relate to this, Colin, because I'm curious what you hear from folks, both personally and professionally. This year, I would say this year, more so than, let's say, the financial crisis and after 9/11, people have basically said, like, all right, what else can I do? How can I pivot to something else? How can I reinvent myself? Because I think, not to get too deep, but like you get to what happens in 2020, you realize how fragile life is and how precious it is. And then to your point, where you're saying, okay, you spend all your time working, and if you really don't like it or you're not happy, you got to do something. And now more than I've ever heard is like people like, what do I do for the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years? You know, because it's like almost like we go back to the new normal. I don't know if I want to go back to the new normal. You know, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. And I think your story is good, because would you suggest to people to maybe give what you did a shot, meaning that you go to the HR people, you go to your boss and let them know, hey, maybe I want to do something different, or is it in this market that's too risky to do?
Well, so first of all, I want to be really clear that I'm going to HR to quit, right? And expecting them to convince you not to is actually not is not the right avenue. I want to encourage people to follow. I don't want people yelling at me on LinkedIn for months.
Why didn't you tell right?
But the story creates another thought process, which is what role HR plays in career exploration, which I want to get to. But to answer your question directly, we're at a place now where information is at our fingertips. There are career matching tools online that people can go to. There's a research you can do about skills that you have or interests that you in and how they intersect with different careers. And I feel like career exploration is something that people do at high school with guidance counselors and in college with career professionals. And then you just start a career and you just think you're supposed to stay there. And I reject that notion. I think that should be an evolving thing that folks are thinking about, because over time you evolve as a person and your skills evolve, right? It's like, you know, your relationship with your career is like your relationship with anything else. You know, it needs work, and it needs investment in and refreshing. And so I think that that's how people need to look at it. Look, every HR office is different. If someone came to me and said, I'm not sure that this is the right fit for me, I would work with them to find something that is, because that's how I approach things. I believe that sometimes people need to be repotted, right? The soil is still rich, but they've grown out of the pot. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But I think, you know, not emotionally reacting to experiences or trauma, that's not a good way to start having that thought process or having those conversations. But a strategic thought process about where you could go, either aspirationally or reasonably. You know, talk to a coach, talk to a recruiter, talk to someone in an HR department or someone in the field or the space that you're interested in who's already doing the work. Get the information you need and put together a game plan and get yourself to the right place.
Makes a lot of sense.
Anything that 2020's taught us, it's that we can be agile. We can survive a series of circumstances we can't control and we don't know the answer to, and life is short.
So true. And also, it's interesting, you mentioned about your Phyllis, I'm not going to be philanthropic
Yeah.
endeavors. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And then also, I wonder too, is that something also that if you're in a career, whether you like it or maybe you're not you're looking for a change, by having these other passions,
Yes.
kind of balances out a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a really important question. Not everybody can go from Wall Street to, the International Rescue Committee. And by the way, if you ask the folks at the International Rescue Committee what I was like the first month, that was an adjustment for me too.
How so?
Well, I was
Giving hard charging. Like
I was look, I was a little authoritarian and dressed like this, and I had a way of communicating that people who were in this NGO sector were not accustomed to, and I had to make some adjustments without changing who I was. Who I was good enough, but I had to learn how I came across and my messaging and my style, which is something I encourage everyone to really think through and learn from. But there are ways to contribute to a lot of meaningful work that's taking place around education reform and gender justice and social justice and LGBTQ work on the ground. There's a lot of good grassroots work around, equality and arts and education. And so you don't have to go to ExecuSearch or WeCruitr or Compliance Search or wherever to look for a career in it. You can join a board. And for folks who, have looked back at 2020 and recognized that, much is given, much is required. There are a lot of 501c3 organizations here in New York City, in the United States, globally, that really could benefit from people who have certain expertise, who have strong networks, who need thought partners and leaders to help advance their work. And I'd encourage people who are looking for a fire to light, to feel a sense of purpose that maybe you're not getting from your everyday experience. Look at LinkedIn for nonprofits. There's a woman by the name of Cynthia Remick who has an amazing organization, who's matching talent, people in senior positions and board opportunities. Volunteer, whatever it is you need to do in the moment. So much about 2020 and what we've learned is that getting up and going to work is good, and it's what we should do for those of us who can do it. But there's so much more that we could be doing to help make this world a little bit better than we found it.
That's great. And I know you practice what you preach, and you do a lot of these things. Would you feel comfortable sharing the activities that you do?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I have a hard time saying no. So I am a volunteer and a facilitator for Inroads, New York, New Jersey. It's a national organization that places young people who are gifted and talented from underrepresented ethnic groups in internships and prepares them for careers in corporate America. It's through Inroads that I was placed at JP Morgan Chase. And so I start there because that is the door that opened up many doors for me. And out of that, I got a lifetime mentor and a man named Ivo Filbert. I'm on 3 boards. I had to think about that for a moment. One is the Workforce Professionals Training Institute, which is a New York City-based 501c3 who's doing work that couldn't be more critical right now if you tried, which is creating and looking for opportunities to get people to work. People with disabilities, people who are re-entering work after imprisonment or starting a family. And so we work with job providers, and other resources that are focused on getting New Yorkers gainful employment. We understand how that has impacts on socioeconomics, on the family unit, on keeping people financially stable and healthy. The other organization I'm on the board of is Youth Represent, which is an amazing organization dedicated to supporting first-time nonviolent youth offenders and their families through the legal process, through the court system. For those who are imprisoned, making sure that they've got counseling and job skills training and job resources when they come out, so they can, matriculate from that experience into being good standing members of society. And there's a lot of good work we're doing around there around financial literacy, around family support, and making sure that one mistake that a young person makes does not dictate their entire life and their work life. And then I'm about to join the Bronx Arts Charter School, which is a community that I've always cared deeply about supporting. And as a child and a nephew of educators, both college professors and Board of Education presidents and teachers, it's an area that's very close to my heart.
That's great. So for people who are watching, so you mentioned about Cynthia Remick, who would help with board if you want a board seat, but then for people who may not be at that level but just want to contribute, is there a site or a best way you can find what's the best fit?
Yes. If people contact me through LinkedIn, I can direct them. I'm having trouble off the cuff, but there's a LinkedIn volunteer site that allows you to explore issue areas and connects you with places who are looking for volunteers and who are looking for and you don't have to be a board member. You could be part of a junior advisory team. There are all kinds of meaningful ways for people to contribute, and these organizations post specifically what they're looking for. It could be so it's called the Volunteer Marketplace.
Volunteer Marketplace.
For LinkedIn for nonprofits, and there are other sites where there are organizations who are posting where they need people, to work at soup kitchens, to be tutors, to participate in Dress for Success. If you have suits or clothes that are, for the workspace for people who are in shelters, and who are in need of support and are entering the workplace for you to donate. There's a ton of resources for folks to get involved in, because let's face it, if you look around us, there's just so much need and so much information. And so I deeply care about these things and encourage others who want to get involved but don't know how to start that process. And if I can be helpful to people who are listening, who want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, it's Colin H. Mincy. I'd be happy to do that.
But I appreciate it. What we could do is when we edit the video to re-put it out, repost on social media, Nicole, Christine could maybe put on there some of the places you mentioned. So this way they can take a look and Google it and go on LinkedIn for the nonprofits. So how do you have the time? That's just that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean that is a challenge. I tend to burn the candle at both ends. But it doesn't feel like a time constraint when you know that you're doing good, right? And so, when you think about it, my job's pretty stressful, I have to say. quite demanding. It's very difficult to even get this scheduled. But you know, I wake up. So if you look at today, for example, I wake up. You know, I woke up participating at 8 a.m. in a anti-racism colonialism work group that's looking at sort of you know, that lens into our work. And you know, I end my day you know, doing an exit interview with someone who's moving on to do really important work, who credits the work they've done at Human Rights Watch to prepare them for that reality. And then later tonight, I have a you know, a meetup group with my friends from Open Society Foundations where I used to work. So so my whole day is dedicated to doing things that contribute to the larger good. And so for me, that doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, the thing about boards is, you know, we meet once every 3 months for each board, and there's some committee meetings, but you know, I try to find time for family and friends when I'm not working, but I do keep a busy schedule. I don't know how not to.
Well, you know, I think, as you said, you know, if you enjoy what you do and you feel you're pursuing something meaningful in your passion, then, like you said, it's not really quote unquote work, you know, because I mean, it's work in the sense you're doing stuff, but at least you enjoy it and it's meaningful, it has purpose. And at the end of the night, at the day when you go to sleep, you can feel good about yourself. And even though you're helping people, tell me if you feel this way too, even though you're helping people, you get a lot back from helping people. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair to say. This is actually a very interesting conundrum. And I think if you ask folks who work in the human rights ecosystem, they'll tell you this. There's a lot of good that you get from this, but there are also, you know, when you're really committed and deeply focused on the work, there's also a feeling that there's so much you didn't get to, because you sort of see a lens of suffering and pain and trauma, and you want to solve it all. And so, yeah, I mean, so part of it is, part of it is cathartic, part of it is liberating. There's a good, free feeling about helping other people. And then when you're really in the zone, you're thinking about all the things you didn't get to and all the things you want to get to. And so that's why, you know, stress and resilience is such an important part of humanitarian work, is just to make sure that people, you know, are able to reset, restore, celebrate their successes and victories, and sort of keep things in focus that you unfortunately won't and can't get to everything. You can only do your very best.
I completely understand this on a very much smaller scale, Colin. So my kids all through high school, they were in a community service club. And one of the main things they did is they take a bunch of the kids who are in this club, and you go to Newark and Manhattan, set up tables, offer food, soup, clothes to homeless people and people in need. And they would do this, you know, regularly. So they would show up because they know a certain day and time they'll show up. And I would come with them because they wanted a parent chaperone. So I would go with them. And at first I felt great that I'm helping people. But to your point, I noticed, I went into this, and I'll be very, very transparent, thinking that a lot of people we're going to see maybe have drug issues, alcohol issues, what have you. And I learned from, because you know when you're handing someone soup, you're talking to them, you're hearing their stories, and it seemed to me so many people had mental, emotional issues that a sandwich wouldn't help, and you know, a cup of hot tea wouldn't help. And I left one hand feeling good we're helping, but the other feeling even worse that unless these people have really serious medical and health assistance, it's never going to change. So I could see where if you're doing this every day and your team is doing it every day, it can in a way be heartbreaking because you see it and you know it and you're like, it's not changing. And unless something happens, it's going to keep going that way. Like, how do you deal with the people at your office? Because that it must be tough to kind of keep them motivated and keep them, especially.
To be honest, they motivate me.
Yeah.
To be honest, and these are folks who've dedicated most of their lives to this work. Right? They're not someone who woke up one day and had an epiphany that I should be focused on other things. We encourage people to take breaks. We have on-staff counselors who are in different parts of the world, who are on hand to support people. We have, we invest in supporting mental health and self-care. We have a sabbatical program for people to take a break after certain years of service. So stress and resilience, like DEI, are institutional priorities. At HRW, I happen to have been working, very, very directly, very closely, very intentionally in those two buckets in my time at Human Rights Watch since January when I joined. And it's an issue for people. And the thing, to remember is that this victory, this amazing work done by many of our colleagues in the U.S. program and advocacy and our crisis response team and other places around the marijuana legislation more. Not all of our investments in investigations and and research and advocacy yield the outcome we want. And so, the manifestation of the stress and the trauma around wanting to help and not always getting to the finish line is also, areas where we have to make sure there's extra and additional support for people.
It's great you do that. I don't know, is that done with a lot of other companies? It doesn't feel that way.
You know what? I don't think so. And I have to tell you that we closed our offices early for COVID. We created a dependent care policy where we reimbursed folks for incremental costs like childcare and electronics for younger children. We gave people the option of reducing their schedule up to 25% with no impact in pay. Like, we've done a lot of really progressive things in the moment because I think, we're so busy taking care of the world. It's really important we have to take care of our own people. And so prioritizing the importance of caring for self, collapsing and defeating the stigmatism on mental health support, which is a real problem in this country and other parts of the world. Proactive mental health is something we should all be celebrating. It should not be something people are ashamed of. And then just from an employee engagement and retention perspective, which is an area we're trying to work on at Human Rights Watch, if the organization takes care of people and people take care of themselves, they will approach their work in a healthy way, which means that they will be able to go further and we'll be able to hold on to them longer. And that is kind of the threshold that I sort of approach how our HR function supports the organization.
Yeah, that's great. I would love it if more companies would do that. To be fair, maybe a lot do, I'm just not aware of it. But you would think you would read more about it. Especially, I'm always on the lookout for articles to write, for Forbes. And I haven't seen, you would think you would see press releases from companies saying, here's what we're doing for our people. Here's all this program. It is clearly not there. Now, they could be doing it. I just don't see it. So it's great that you guys are doing it. And It's probably even tough for you to do it too, because I'd imagine, your organization relies a lot on fundraising, and it has to be hard to fundraise where you can't meet people, you can't have dinners, you can't have events.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and it's so great you brought that up. I just, we have a development function like no other. We do not accept money from corporations or governments. So all of our money comes from individual contributors and foundations. And this development team raises almost $90 million a year.
It seems like a lot. Is that a lot in your?
Yes, it's a lot. It's a lot of money when you don't for an NGO when you're not accepting government funding and corporate funding. It's a ton of money, and it's used responsibly, and it goes to our global outlet and the meaningful work that's done. But we've dinners and film festivals that we're used to getting a lot of these donations have been canceled. And so, we've had to pivot to virtual global events and other things to try to keep up. But and then, as you may have heard, there are a lot of conversations about a projection of an economic downfall, right? Or however you want to call it. And so we're preparing and making really good financial decisions from a strategic perspective. But yes, offering these kinds of benefits cost money, but we decided that this was not an argument about economics. It was an argument about values. And with so many, a large percentage of our population are women, and many of them are women and men with children, and they are homeschooling for the first time. There's a reason we weren't all teachers. And so we felt it was a values argument. If we were going to expect people to contribute to work, because our work cannot stop, because atrocities around the world don't stop, we had to do something meaningful to support people in the moment. And I'm very proud of the work we did.
That's great. If we could circle back to what you mentioned, like NGOs, and then another kind of, for people
501c3s.
Yeah, and people like myself, to be fair, who are not terribly familiar with these designations, maybe, and I'm just looking at the time, and thank you so much, because I know now I know even more than ever you're a busy guy with a lot on your plate. So can you maybe just quickly say, like, the different kind of organizations, because everyone's always a little leery. Hey, is this kind of a legit cause, or is this not? Like, what's an NGO? What are some of the differences, so people be a little bit more educated? What's out there?
Finally, a question I can't answer well. Look, a 501c3 organization or a nonprofit or a charitable organization, meets certain standards in the IRS tax code, and an NGO is is literally a non-governmental organization that is typically they're nonprofit organizations, but they have some kind of humanitarian or social sciences lens, where they're operating in a space of high public identity, and they are seen as lobbying different sectors of government and private corporations to advance certain missions. So an NGO is just a very large charitable organization, but it operates without independent of government funding or influence.
So if people like looking to say, hey, I'm this time of year, like we started talking at the beginning of the conversation, that I'm thinking of giving to good causes and all that, should that weigh into it? Is there a way that they could look and find, hey, how can I find a good cause but feel comfortable that it's the right people? Because you see so many articles where they'll talk about a certain charity, a certain cause, And then you look how much money actually goes to the recipients, and it's so
Yeah.
small compared to what the company itself and the executives take home. And you're like, why am I going to give? Because it's not really going to the people in need.
Yeah, so I would, by the way, I would encourage people to contribute to Human Rights Watch. If you go to HRW.org, our website, you can see all the amazing work that's being done, all the issue areas that we cover. I'd also encourage people to go to Charity Navigator, which is the world's largest, nonprofit evaluator. You can find nonprofits and issue areas that you're particularly interested in. You can also look at different evaluative measures about how that money is used, what percentage of that money goes to the work versus operational costs and all those types of things. I'd encourage, if you're not following LinkedIn for Nonprofits, please do so. It's a fabulous consortium of nonprofits. There's content, there's calls to action. It's just a good way, if you're worried about our country, if you're in the United States, if you're worried about the world, if you're outside the United States, if you're outside of the United States and you're still worried about our country in the United States, I understand that too. It's just a good way to see all the meaningful work and the talented people sort of contributing to this thread of, and this moment. There's something about this moment that feels really different in terms of philanthropy and volunteerism and social justice. So, and of course, if people need direction or if I can be helpful, they can reach out to me privately. But I'll make sure that I get. Is it Nicole? It is. Right?
Yes.
Yes. Make sure I get Nicole some of those resources. So when this is rebroadcast, some of those things can be live on screen as we're talking.
That'd be great. But let me ask, just to follow up on what, when you said it's different, is different how it's going? Different, better, worse?
Well, so I'll be clear. What I think is better is that more people have come off of the sidelines to contribute to ways in which our communities, our country, our neighbors, our young people can be better supported. To get there has been some not so great things, but I would say that something after the George Floyd killing in this country, I think some really good conversations have come about people in marginalized communities and access and experiencing life differently than their counterparts. And from that has created a lot of allies who see that that we could be better and could do better, and who are venturing into spaces that they haven't been in before to help contribute to that outcome. And I think it's an end that justifies the means.
So at least it feels as it may be going in a more positive direction. Unfortunately, with everything that happened to get us there, but
it's hard to find a silver lining in a tragedy and a set of circumstances as horrific as that was. But yes, I think that a lot of people who didn't say anything and who didn't previously do anything when Eric Garner was killed, or the young man in Baltimore was killed, said, "Oh no, this is not okay, and I'm going to do something I haven't done before, which is do something." And I think that's a really important inflection point in our journey to just live in a world that all of our kids and their friends and the people who we care about and who are coming up behind us can feel safe and can feel like they have an equal access to striving and thriving safely with a purpose, with an identity. And I think we're moving towards that space. And there's a lot of really good people trying to fight to make sure that that happens.
I think this is a good way to wrap it up. That's awesome. That's beautiful. And I'm hoping the same as you, that it is, people are starting to be much more aware. Took a pandemic and everything you talked about to start making people say, hey, we have to do something, you have to make some changes. And that's why I'm so glad we had this conversation. And people, and I think it's so helpful to hear for someone like yourself who wanted to be a banker, started being a banker, pivot to HR, into this area of nonprofit, international rescue, human rights, and trying to make changes, and for people to understand what it's like, what it's about, because I think people are generally good natured and want to help, but sometimes don't know what to do or how to do it or what it's about. So I think this is a good starting. This is a great point for a lot of people. And this is why I figured we could include a lot of the links, a lot of the places to go to, so that people could really feel empowered to make a difference too.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. It's not at all the conversation I thought we'd have, but it feels like the conversation
is it good though? Is it
we should have had. So I'm glad we did. And I'll just leave by saying one of the most interesting things when I've talked to people who have different political leanings that I do, who look at the world a little bit differently, is you don't have to be in the position of being oppressed to appreciate its impacts and the traumas that it has on people. And so what I've learned in this moment is about empathy, and understanding one another, and having conversations with people who look differently, who live differently, and learning from them and using that to sort of color how you look at the world. I think that in itself is a really good starting point to creating a stronger sense of community with people who look at the world differently. Because I don't think that people who don't look like me or think like me are bad people. Many of them are in my life and are close friends, but I do think going a step further and investigating and learning from people who are different helps gain a sense of empathy and a call to action that I think people are looking for.
That's great. And I'm in. So let me know too what I could do to help. I'm really impressed with the organization, what you're doing there. And separately, we'll talk later. Whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
How I definitely love to contribute somehow, some way, because it's such a great cause. So thank you so much, Colin, for sharing everything. This was a really great conversation. Even though it may have went a different direction you thought, I hope that it sounds like it was a good direction.
No, it was the right direction. Yeah, it was the right direction. I appreciate it.
So
by the way, I went back to math. It's 15 years.
I'm sorry?
15 years. I went back and did the math.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you for all that you do for the market and for people and your teams as well. And thanks for inviting me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Colin. Thanks so much.